Hello, good morning, everyone. And for those who are watching us from different time zones, good afternoon or good evening wherever you are. And for those who are new in this platform, my name is Marilyn. I'm the founder and CEO of Customized Training Solutions Private Limited, or CTS, and we are passionate about helping leaders and organizations who are continuous learners and action takers to transform and thrive in all aspects by co-creating, contextualizing, and customizing programs with our world-class resources. We have served over 3,000 leaders from over 30 countries in different industries, including Petronas, Sony Mobile, PruLife UK, Ayala Group, Tencent, Jollibee Foods Corporation, Legato Healthcare, and Shell, to name a few. And the reason why we are doing or organizing several interventions, including this interview, is to help leaders who don't know how to stay relevant and adapt to the next normal, those who find it stressful to lead and ensure performance of a hybrid team, and for those who are afraid that they can't keep their team or their business. So, to be able to stay relevant and continue to lead more effectively in any situation, do join us in these interventions. And for today, it's my great pleasure to introduce our leader. Nathan has a 25 years history in working with and leading teams across Europe, Asia, and Australia. He has worked in different functions from sales, product and marketing, strategy, operations, and digital. Regardless of role, Nathan has had a focus on driving innovation, incremental value, and growth outcomes to both customers and his teams. Nathan recently joined Kearney, an advisory firm where he is a digital partner looking to pay it forward with what he has learned and help others, avoiding the need to repeat his learning when it comes to driving digital business outcomes. Prior to joining Kearney, Nathan was the Chief Digital Officer for M1, a telco embracing digital transformation in Singapore. Nathan was responsible for the digital strategy, transformation, execution, and establishing a digital office to support Singapore ambition to be a self-sufficient digital business who is providing um, who is a provider of telecom services. So, without so much further ado, I'd like to bring in Nathan. Hi, Nathan.
Good morning, Marilyn. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. And just for the information of our audience, how do I get to know you is through like a common friend that introduced me, and we were able to work together already through a project recently, and it has really received a lot of positive comments. So thank you for your help on that program, on that project, Nathan. And because I was telling Nathan, oh, just nice, your last name is Bell. This is the next two sessions I will have is basically my Christmas Christmas conversations, perhaps. So I'm glad that it's just nice that his last name is Bell.
It works. It works.
Yeah. So, I'll be asking you several questions. And again, we would like to invite our audience to join us in this conversation. It's not just about us having this interview, but also inviting them to join us with their questions or with their aha moments during the conversation. So to start with, please do share with us your leadership experiences. If you have like influencers or a leadership favorite your favorite leadership style that you'd like to share with us, please do so.
Sure, Marilyn. Look, I think for me it was very interesting. I got thrust into leadership, I would say, when I was quite young, or quite early in my career, and it was very exciting because at that stage of my career, being a manager was the definition of progress. So I was very excited to be leading a small team, but I was the youngest person on that team, so it was a bit intimidating managing people that were older than me. I think over time, as that progressed, there's a lot of things you learn, a lot of difficult things you learn as a leader. The importance of actually having the hard conversation, and it sounds silly, but there's a lot of people I know even today who don't like having the difficult conversation in terms of, look, here's some issues that I see with your performance. This is where I really need you to focus on improving. And yes, these things that you're doing are great, but these things need to improve. Or even the harder conversation. Sorry, it's not working out. I need to let you go. And these are things that as human beings we don't like to do, but it's important for the broader team and things that we need to do. One of the things I've realized, I guess, in my leadership experiences is that the size of the team doesn't matter. It just doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter. I've managed teams as small as 3 or 4 to more than 1,000, and in all of that, I've learned it's how you bring yourself to every conversation, and how you're supporting the team at different levels, and recognizing that you need to be empowering your leaders who are reporting to you and have their own team. So all of these things come together. Now, in terms of the leadership archetype or the leadership approach that I like, there's a great book called The 1 Minute Manager. And I was fascinated by this book because I'd always learned previously that you had a profile that you brought to work, and that's who you're going to be as a leader. The 1 Minute Manager talks about the fact of being adaptable as a leader, and being a different type of leader depending on the situation. And I've really adopted that, I would say, since reading that book throughout my career. It's very interesting. People will say sometimes that, Nathan, you must have a multiple personality disorder or something, because in the morning you were so bubbly, and late morning you were very serious, and then after that you were very executive, and then after that you were very camaraderie, and it's like, who are you? Um, and when you explain it to people that, look, this is just what you need to be as a leader, you need to sort of figure out the role you need to play in the room, in the conversation, and guiding the team. And if people don't know, or know that you're always going to be consistent, on the one hand, I think it drives a degree of predictability. On the other hand, I don't think it actually helps people in their own career and development, right? If I'd learned earlier on that it is okay to be different in different situations, I think I would have been a much happier manager, rather than being very nervous going, oh, I've got to be tough. I've got to be tough. I'm the senior guy. I got to be tough. So yeah, that for me was really, really insightful.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that with us, your experience. And again, like we learn much of our leadership styles, and like how we go about it with the work or the career that we are in, right? Or we've been through, right? And I really love what you've shared about the importance of being adaptable, because again, there's really no such thing as just one leadership style, right? We have to be adaptable depending on the situations, as you just shared with us. So thank you so much for reminding us with that. And so that leads me to my question: what is leadership for you, having said that experience?
Oh, wow, the ultimate question. What is leadership? I think for me, leadership is a few different aspects. Leadership is being the guide, and what I mean by that is helping to guide the team. I'm a huge believer in that we shouldn't be telling teams or individuals what to do. I think we should be therefore measuring the outcome, and therefore being that guide, saying, "Hey, we're going up this mountain. Let's figure that out. But you need to figure out how you're going to get up your part of the mountain, and so on and so forth." So I think being the guide is the first part of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I think the second aspect of leadership is taking accountability. I'm a huge believer in allowing teams to learn, and I don't just mean reading textbooks to learn, but to learn as they're doing the work. Now, a side effect of that, if you will, is that some of those things won't work out the way that you want them to. And in order to make sure your team feels safe, you actually need to take accountability for when things go wrong. Because if you don't, people won't be willing to learn. They won't be willing to take risks, and everything becomes risk averse, and everything stops. So I think accountability is the second part. The third part, I think, is also being vulnerable. Actually, demonstrating that it's okay to be human. It's okay to have multiple aspects of who you are, and sharing them with the teams that you're working with. It's often that people talk about the fact that no, I can't disclose anything of what's going on with me or who I am. But I'm a huge believer in sort of sharing. Yeah, the family and I did this over the weekend. Well, what did you do? It drives much more of a collaboration within the team. The final point I would sort of say is helping to set that flag on their hill in terms of leadership. It's something my dad always taught me growing up. If you're going to aim for the ground, you'll hit it every time. If you aim for the stars, you might not get there, but you might even just get past the moon. And what an amazing accomplishment that would be. So I think as leaders, we're responsible for setting that ambitious direction. And it's not about measuring, hey, did we hit the stars or not? It's about how far did we actually get, and celebrating those successes and making sure people understand that there's a difference between the actual target versus the ambition that we're driving to. So it's that thought leadership, if you will. It's that ambition to be able to guide and motivate the team in terms of what they can achieve. So that for me is leadership. And yes, of course, there's all the hygiene factors of people management and performance management, and making sure you're doing the right thing by the team and setting up the team and having the right people in the team. But for me, leadership is much more than that. You have a responsibility to the people around you. You have a responsibility to those above you or aligned to you as co-leaders, if you will. So all of that, I think, becomes really important. And that's why I always struggle with defining what is leadership, Marilyn, because it's so vast. It really is.
And so far, this is probably my most favorite definition of leaderships from the interviews I had. I would say, because how you actually categorized or divided it into four different things. Like, first, to be a guide, because again, like, being authoritative is like, gone are the days that you just direct
Totally.
and like, just give all the directions to all the people. You have to guide them on what to do or where to go, at least, right? And it's up to them how do they go about it as well. That's how people learn in in that case, right? And taking accountability. And while you're explaining about taking accountability, you actually made mention about safety, right? And again, that's very important in any organization, like having that psychological safety in order for people to speak up, to bring in the ideas on the table, and to also take ownership for the actions that they take, right? I really love that part. And being vulnerable, I just recently actually wrote a blog around vulnerability, how it will serve you as a leader. Because like a lot of leaders, the reason why some leaders are actually afraid to be a leader or manage team, right? Or some people to step up from, like, from being an individual contributor to a leader, right? It's because of this part where they're afraid to, like, show up the way they are as human, right? Like what you said, it's important to bring in that human within the organization, because after all, you're working with humans, right? And
Completely.
again, like what I've been always hearing as well, ambitious direction. So again, as a leader, we are the visionaries, right? We actually set directions, for people to know, like, where are we going to in the future. So I really love how you actually defined leadership. It's such a gift, right? For Christmas. How would you define and describe next normal? I mean, in my introduction, I made mention earlier about the next normal, the hybrid team, and all those stuff. So I'm just wondering for you, like, coming from the telco and now moving to Kearney is a consulting company, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so moving there. So how would you define and describe the next normal based on that transition and experience, I guess, that you have?
It's really interesting, Marilyn, because I think when we went into the pandemic and everyone had to start doing remote working,
Mm-hmm,
something happened which I think we all sort of forgot when we were looking to pivot back after the pandemic. And that
agree.
is that everybody had to unlearn and relearn.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And yes, in some companies, in some countries, there was a degree of work from home, but
mm-hmm,
as a globe, we had never operated at home, from home at that scale before. But we actually therefore needed time to be able to make that transition in
Mhm.
terms of what that was going to look like. And for a lot of people, it was like, wow, this is amazing. I didn't know I could actually, work this way before. And now what's really interesting to me is now that the pandemic is over, a lot of people are saying, hey, everyone come back to the office and that's the way we're going to work here, just the way it was. And it's like that never happened. And I think that's wrong. I think the new norm will continue to evolve. In all honesty, I think it's a case of understanding what work brings us together and what work can we do in on our own. When I say in isolation, right? I don't think isolation is the right word anymore because there's
True.
so many collaboration tools. It doesn't have to be in isolation. So I think understanding what work needs to be done together and what work can be done remotely. And the nuance of that is really, really important because even at Carney, something I'm really proud of is the fact that we try to create the environment of when we want people to be able to come together. So it's sort of saying, look, we want to spend a couple of days a week at least in terms of coming together in the office to work on the engagements we have for our customers. And this is if we're not sitting with our clients and working with them directly. So I think it's really important to understand that balance of how do you create the right environment. And that for me is the new norm. Where as leaders, it's not enough for us to simply put down the mandate saying, hey, you will be in the office. It's what is the environment we're creating to be able to realize that? Is it a case of, look, if you come in, we'll be doing some shared learning. If you come in, we'll be doing some celebrations. If you come in, we'll be whiteboarding and coming up with some new ideas together to celebrate, how do we go and help our clients? So I think this concept of the new norm, I think has still got a lot to go through, both as leaders and as the teams that we are supporting. But I really fundamentally believe it's just it's another pivot on the unlearn and relearn that we went through from the pandemic to where we are now. People have realized that they don't have to always be in the office to do their job. They've realized there are tools that enable them to do that. So why should they have to give all of that up if they want a degree of flexibility? And for me, I think the truth is going to land somewhere in the middle, and I think that's okay. Making sure that as human beings we retain that human connection, which I believe is so important. I don't believe it was healthy for any of us to be working in isolation for as long as we did during the pandemic. And I'm seeing a lot of people who struggle with, reconnecting with other folks, saying, and silly things, right? Do I shake your hand? Do I fist bump? Do I give you an elbow? Do I nod? You know, small stuff that we take for granted, but actually has become really, really important in that engagement. So, I think all of that is important to understand the context of the new norm and how leaders have to bring the best of them, the most creative of themselves in terms of finding the right balance.
Yeah, and I remembered I had this conversation as well with an executive director of a company in my recent trip in Malaysia, and we were talking about like what's really the hybrid setting is, right, and what will work. And again, like what you've said, human, when you say working with human, right, it's all about connections, right? We needed to have all those connections with other people, right, or with our
Yep,
colleagues to build that relationship. But at the same time, you also mentioned here like how is it still like evolving, and really the key is to create the environment or the right environment that works for you, because each and every operation, each and every company, each and every culture is different from each other, right? And it's really about the flexibility, like what you've mentioned, around like which one works for us, and like let's do it right. So I
absolutely.
just want, before I proceed to the next question, I just like to read this message from Sri Ram Narisham. Hi Nathan, hope you are doing well. So nice to see you live after a long time. One of the key aspects of leadership is creating an inclusive culture where team members, partners, suppliers, vendors all come together on the same platform to deliver business outcomes. Thank you for your leadership. Wow. Thank you for that, Sri Ram. And yes, really, I really love how inclusive your comment is, including everyone from members to partners to suppliers and vendors all together. Thank you so much for making that comment. And again, it's an invitation for everyone who's listening to us live to join us in this conversation. Ask your question, share your aha moments or comments along the way. So that leads me to the next part of the conversation, which I believe will be the meaty part of the conversation. So, having said your first three question would be the perspective that you have in this topic. And so from your experience as a corporate leader and working with corporate leaders, what would you say would be the top three problems that most leaders would normally face?
uh, um, the first one, Marilyn, is impatience.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's because a lot of corporate leaders, and me included, feel the pressure of what we were under to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, you turn to your team saying, you've got to figure this out. You got to figure this out. Got to get on with it. Get it done. I don't care how, where, when, whatever. So I think impatience. And the problem with that is it actually drives a very different behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And what we tend to forget as leaders is it's actually our responsibility to try and figure out, how do I give my team the headspace, the oxygen, if you will, to try and figure out what's the best way to solve it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the context of, if you want a quick decision, get two people into a room, and then just make the decision and make sure everyone understands that's why, rather than trying to balance as a good leader and take everyone's opinion on board. And if everyone just gets frustrated because you had to make a quick decision and no one's opinion was really taken on board. So I think that's the first thing is impatience.
Mm-hmm.
The second aspect that I see a lot of senior leaders struggle with is bridging. So when they come up through their own career, we actually tend to forget where we started from, right? And therefore, when we get into a meeting and we look around the room, we actually tend to forget that there are different levels of maturity of the people in the room with us.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I'm actually quite passionate about acknowledging, and giving junior people the opportunity to have a voice, to understand it's actually safe to express an opinion. Now, there's a big difference between expressing an opinion and saying on behalf of your overall team, yep, this is what we're going to go and do, because I don't think that's right either. And as a leader, you need to balance that. But I think sometimes when we get into a room, we will look just at the senior most person, and then the junior folks can all become quite terrified and nervous, going, oh, I don't want to be in this room ever. I never want to become a senior leader if this is what it's like. This is frightening. And I reflect on when I was younger and a contributor and in some of those sessions, and it was quite intimidating. But what I find fascinating is that even though we go through that ourselves, we still have a tendency to then go and replicate that as senior leaders, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It doesn't break. So I think that's the other aspect, is forgetting our past and the challenge that we faced, and therefore not taking the opportunity to be able to bring a different version of yourself and senior leaders into those meetings. So that's the second part, is that bridging between generations of people in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
The third aspect I still find is communication, which sounds so weird for senior leaders who would struggle with communication. And what I mean by that is the relevance in communication. So I often find senior leaders are amazing at pitching their product or their company to external organizations. It's not a problem. Let me tell you the three things that we're amazing at. Let me tell you what we're working on next. It's going to be phenomenal. But how do you drive the relevance within your organization? So when I was at M1, I ran the digital office, and I had a multitude of roles. We had designers, I had software developers, security people, product owners, data analysts, all different. Now, when you make a statement in terms of saying, hey, we're going to go and drive to a cloud native digital platform, we're going to become a digital provider that also offers telco services, that's incredibly generic and actually means nothing to anybody in a specific team. When you go and say to a software developer team, therefore, and say, look, What we actually want to do is become self-sufficient in the way that we build products and capabilities. And you're going to be centered to that. You're actually going to be helping us build new technology within the business. Isn't that exciting? And software developers love that. They love getting hands-on. They hate sitting on the sidelines and watching someone else do it. Or when you're looking at the data side, look, we want to turn data into a value proposition as part of our goal of becoming a digital provider. That gets them excited. But unless you're having that relevant conversation, the engagement, if you will, can actually be quite low. And we all talk about these engagement surveys that exist in a lot of companies, and we sort of pat ourselves on the back when we get a good engagement survey. But for me, what I'm really passionate about, and there are some things I can't control as a senior leader, but there are some things I absolutely can. So the things that I can, which comes a lot down to communication, why am I not able to be able to go and drive that?
Wow, thank you for summarizing that for us. And again, like even entrepreneurs like me, I do face some of these problems. Really, especially the impatience one. I can relate so much to that. And again, that's also the observations I'm having with most of the organizations that we work. They always like communicate that challenge for, especially for the last two, around bridging that gap between generations. And that's actually part of the conversation we had in the previous project we worked, as well as communications, of course, and how they can make it as relevant and engaging as possible, right? So thank you so much for summarizing that. And obviously, we will not leave our audience with all those problems. We will help them somehow in addressing those by sharing with us, what are the important leadership capabilities or skills that you must have in this next normal, new normal, to be able to continue to lead effectively, or probably to address those problems that you have raised earlier.
Yeah. I think the very first thing, most important thing for me is the human connection. As senior leaders, we are responsible for connecting people together, and never assume that people will just do that on their own, because after the pandemic, a lot of people are actually quite anxious. I know when I started my new job, I knew very few people where I was going into. And to be honest, I was also a bit anxious. I was like, oh my gosh, who do I talk to? What's this going to be like? And when you start taking that on a corporate level, that's huge. So therefore it's really important that as senior leaders we're helping to drive that human connection and encouraging those people to come together, and it doesn't matter whether it's virtual or whether it's face to face. I think that's really, really important.
Mhm.
um, the second is, I would say, is planning. And it might be that you bring in some of your senior leaders in terms of, what's the plan you're driving, the plan for your people, the plan for your organization, the plan for the outcomes you're being measured against. And that actually comes back to that first challenge I see that corporate leaders have, is back to impatience. Is
Mhm.
I can't predict everything, right? It's impossible. The moment a senior leader can predict everything, I tell you, they're going to go to the stock market and they're just going to smash it. They really will. It'll be, it'll be huge. But if we plan for as much as we can, that has two impacts. That removes a degree of unpredictability, number one. The other thing that it does, though, is that when you do come to your teams with something urgent, they'll know that it's a rarity. And it's a rarity because it's therefore was out of your control. And therefore, hey, guys, we need to rally around this to go and figure it out. So people sometimes think that, oh, Nathan, you can't plan for everything. You're absolutely right. You can't. But what you can do is actually be able to go and help the teams understand that that is not the modus operandi. That's not the standard way that we're going to be working. So if the majority of things can come across as planned to the team, when it doesn't, it's going to be much more better accepted and supported by the team. The other key aspect, gosh, and I had it in my head ready to share, but the other key aspect that I was going to touch on was that's right, your leadership team. So when you're establishing your team, it's not just enough in terms of looking at what are the business or the technical competences that you're trying to introduce, but also what are the personality competencies that you're trying to introduce. And a diversity of personality competencies is as equally important as business and corporate competencies. And people are going to say, Nathan, what are you talking about? Are you saying I need the serious guy, I need the comedian, I need the communicator, I need the detail person? Well, actually, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And the reason why that's important is I used to have a used to probably still do a reputation of a bit of a blue sky person. I was always looking to the future in terms of, hey, this is what the future can look like for an organization, for a client, for a product. And I'd gotten feedback saying that's well and good, but you've got to bring that back to a degree of reality. And I knew that that was a gap for me. So I made sure that there was one or two people in my team who were very reality driven, who were not going to be sort of setting the world on fire with their ideas, but were always going to be that safe pair of hands. So having that aspect, having a couple of other folks who were really going to be able to continuously drive the pulse of the teams that we were working with. Really, that's that sixth human sense, as I like to call it, in terms of understanding. The vibe of the room is not good, or the vibe of the team is not good. We need to act on it. So I think that diversity is really important, and that actually helps with bridging in terms of being able to drive the difference across the different generations, but also actually helps in driving an understanding that an acceptance of diversity and inclusion, right? So if everyone is like you, and you're putting the flag on the hill and thumping your chest and going, we're all going this way. Very quickly, you'll have a subservient culture within your team, and you'll likely have people that are out saying, look, this is not what I want to be a part of. So I think having that diversity of leadership is really, really powerful as well.
That's very true. I really love how you actually summarized it. And again, we've already talked about human connections earlier because that's how it is. And as a leader, you have to know how to work with human, how to like listen to them, how to connect with them, how to engage with them, how to build relationship with them, right? And again, like I believe that almost everything can be addressed with planning as well, right? Because it really removes a lot of like possible issues that will be faced
I
in the
agree.
future. Yeah. And also again the team, which is the most important, because as a leader, it's always it's almost like um always that you will have to work with team, whether it's an internal or external team. And it's always amazing when you leverage with diversity. Diversity is like we've been hearing a lot about D&I, diversity, equity, and inclusions, but it seems like a buzzword in the recent years, right?
Totally.
But actually it's really a reality that we have to face, or we have to incorporate in our organizations, right? Because I mean, diversity, it's there. It's important not only because it's on trend, but also, as you've mentioned, it's important to have that differences, as well as leveraging on those different competencies and strength of the team that you work with. So thank you so much for reminding us about that.
I was just going to say, Marilyn, I think you're absolutely right. So I think diversity inclusion has become a tick box. It's like, what's our diversity inclusion strategy? But I think what people fail to realize, the power of diversity inclusion is just huge. There's so much you can actually achieve when you are bringing those different personalities and capabilities into a team, into an organization. So I would actually encourage businesses not just to look at the tick mark of achieving diversity and inclusion so that new talent coming in goes, oh, wow, you're diverse and you're inclusive. This is really, really good. But actually thinking about what is it going to mean for our business? Because the moment you can quantify what it means, the diversity inclusion actually becomes part of who the organization is, rather than just what it wants to be able to be visible to comply to.
Exactly. I was actually surprised. It was an aha moment for me when I took this certification course on AI, and I was surprised. Oh, how come there's diversity part on this session? And then I realized, oh yeah, because that's sometimes what some surveys or studies misses, like the
Totally.
diversity of the people. At the end of the day, like despite that we have specific market or target audience that we work with, we can't really get away from having that diversity as well, especially in organizations where like different generation, different genders, and now that we are global and working online as well, like even the culture cultural differences, or you can even hire people from anywhere in this globe, right? So and again, that's a leverage, like what we were trying to highlight on this message. It's really a leverage on the different perspective, ideas, and insights from those people from the diverse team, right? So thank you for that. So what do you believe is the role of learning, leadership, and transformation in order to thrive in this next normal? It
No,
sounds so big or huge, but probably this is an invitation to summarize like what we have. i- like if you were to summarize what we have just discussed, what will it be?
wow. The role of leadership in learning and transformation. I think those are two topics combined, which are probably almost heavier than the planet of the Earth. Anyway, um, I think, and I'll use myself as an example here, Marilyn. So I've gone from the telco digital world into the consulting world, and it
Mhm.
really is literally changing industries.
True.
And as part of that, I'm having to unlearn and relearn for myself, which is exciting, but also incredibly nerve wracking at the same time. I think I'm learning as much now as I did probably in the first 4 or 5 years of my career, in all honesty.
Mhm.
And the reason I share that is one of my biggest appreciations on the learning aspect is that it's a two-way street. You have to have a desire and a willingness to learn, and therefore to go and absorb information from all different sources, whether that's online, whether that's actually shadowing teams, whether that's speaking with colleagues or leaders. But it's also the responsibility of the leaders that we're setting those people up for success on their learning. And for me, learning, to your point of summarizing what we've talked about before, it's a real collaboration aspect, right? And it's a real relevance aspect. When you're doing compliance training, for example, why do businesses struggle with compliance training? The biggest reason, what's the relevance? Why am I learning about compliance? I don't have anything to do with compliance. I'm not in legal. I'm not in regulatory. I'm not in risk. It's not my issue, right? I'm just here to develop software or to manage the security. So that relevance piece, I think, in learning is incredibly important.
Mhm.
In terms of the transformation, leadership transformation, oh, so I've actually been involved in 4 transformations. Of those 4, I've led 3 myself. And I can tell you the biggest part in that is who are the actual characters and roles in the team and what role are they performing? So, how are you doing that inclusively? But I think the biggest aspect comes down to communication.
Mhm.
Um, as senior leaders, we sort of say, "Oh, it's going to be amazing. We're going to transform this. It's going to be a beautiful outcome for our customers, for our people. It's going to be huge." Unfortunately, we fail to then communicate and what's going to happen in the meantime. So what we just keep doing what we're doing, and miraculously this will change one day. We'll leave on a Friday, come back on a Monday, and we'll be like, "Wow, that was amazing! Wow, thanks very much. Appreciate the transformation. That's really good." So the communication of, look, this is going to be really hard, and we're going to take it a week at a time, and we're going to learn together, and we're going to collaborate together, and we're going to make sure that we acknowledge our wins and that we learn from our failures, but we keep sort of progressing forward. That then equally becomes important, right? And so some of the things that we've talked about before is understanding that from a leadership perspective, if you're going to be impatient when it comes to transformation, I guarantee you it'll fail. It'll fail. And you'll look on the one hand saying, "Hey, I'm pushing stuff through," but then you won't actually realize the outcomes that you were after to begin with. So, transformation is so the way to describe transformation is it's like having a lung transplant and a heart transplant on a gurney racing down a street. It's scary. It's scary. And just because as a senior leader, we think it's less scary for us because we're not at the coalface having to deal with it. Imagine what it's like for people who are on that coalface having to face it day by day. So driving that bridging, like we talked about before, getting close to the teams that are involved in transformation and being able to guide them through that and hearing them out and making sure that they know that they have a voice in that conversation, making sure that the communication is relevant of what it's going to mean to them, and being transparent in terms of with your communication of, look, it'll be great, but to get there, it'll be hard, and we'll make sure that we acknowledge the improvements on the journey. So, look, leadership is tough. I've learned a lot in my 25 years, Marilyn, and I'm still learning today. In all honesty, and I love when I have folks in my team that are teaching me as well and coaching me as well, reverse mentoring, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm a huge believer that if you bring the best of who you are as a leader, acknowledge your faults, acknowledge your vulnerabilities, then there's a lot you can actually achieve with your teams, because then they will be able to do the same. And when everyone's being genuine, you'll find that people are going to give the best of who they are. And look, I know there will be some people listening out there saying, "Yeah, but there are some bad performers." Of course, in anything you do, even in sport, there are people who don't perform the way you expect them to. But guess what? They get replaced, and that's part of your job as a leader as well. But we've got to talk about the majority of people here. How are you supporting the majority of the organization?
Mm-hmm.
If you've established a team that is the majority of folks that don't understand or are failing, well, guess what? That's you as a leader. That's not them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're bringing the best of who you are, encouraging them to bring the best of who they are, providing that guidance, providing that coaching, the ambition of where we're headed, I believe in the art of the possible, right? You can achieve just about anything.
Wow, that's really huge message for us, really. And again, it boils down to communications and leadership, right? In any transformation, in any change. And I guess that's where like a lot of change management or transformation like fails, right? Because they fail to like communicate and to excite the people, or to share their whys before they even implement all the transformation that has to happen. And so like that's the key of the message here is really about learning, continuous learning, and communications, I would say. I hope I say it right.
Yeah,
Oh,
totally.
we have comments, but I guess this is a spam telling us about adult dating sites. So
Oh,
that's not appropriate for our current conversation, but thank you anyway. So that leads me to my last two questions, which are very exciting. I would say are very open questions as well, because you could say any about anything, because it's really an open question. And so I'm curious to know, how did you also get about coming up with your answer in these two questions, which would I normally call as the Miss Universe, so in this case Mr. Universe questions. So the first one is, if you have a magic wand and can use it, what will you do with it?
if I had a magic wand and could use it, um, I think for me, I would love to leave a world behind that I know my kids would be proud of and enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And I reflect on the world we are today, and I think we've made some incredible advances, and I'm incredibly
Mm-hmm.
impressed by some of the engineers and innovators that are out there. But I think one thing that worries me and a lot of people that I talk to is, what's the world going to be like for our kids? So if I had a magic wand, which means I would know that the world my kids live in was going to be safe, the air would be clean, and we're not going to be riding around on cars with sails on them because there's no energy left anymore. I think that's what I'd be keen to do with a wand.
Wow. At least I think like with the work that you do right now, it's somehow like what you're doing as well, right? With all the transformations, with all the effort, and even the messages that you share with everyone around you, right? That also like have some sort of effect, or some sort of contribution in order to making this world a better place to live in, I would say.
Totally.
So thank you for that effort and for all the work that you have been doing so far. And so that leads me to my last question. If you were to ask yourself a question that you can best answer, what would it be? What question would that be? And because you can best answer that question, please do answer that for us.
Wow. Okay. Um, I think for me, the question would be, how are you going to pay it forward? So it's something that I'm very passionate about. So I'm a mentor to a number of startups. I'm working with accelerator programs with startups. With Carney, my job is to try and help them solve some of their challenges and hopefully not repeat the difficult learnings that I went through myself. So I think that's the question I'd be asking. How are you going to pay it forward? And to be honest, I think a lot of it at the moment is actually through experimentation, Marilyn. And I love working with startups. And the reason I love working with startups is when you speak to someone who has an idea about a product or an offering or a service that they're looking to bring to market, that sparkle in their eye of, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Am I going to go and do all this great stuff? But unfortunately, in the current dynamic of the world, a lot of them don't succeed, not because of the product or the service that they have, but because of the environment they're trying to operate in. Um, and I see businesses struggling in the same way. A lot of businesses feel the way that it is today is the way that it's always going to be, and there's no way that they can change it. So I think that for me is what I'm looking at, and how I try and pay it forward is actually just sort of share ideas and create safe space of, look, this is what it could be. But I don't think I have the answer yet, in all honesty. So for me, it's about experimentation. It's trying different techniques and sharing knowledge in different ways, with teams, with startups, the best I can, and also with individuals. I'm also mentoring a number of folks on their own career journeys, which I'm very passionate about. And I think it's, those are different ways that I'm trying to pay it forward. I don't think there's a silver bullet. If there is, I'd write a book and everyone would have it and it'd be super easy. But I think for me, it's just experimenting with different ways of paying it forward and hopefully achieving the right outcome.
Wow, thank you so much for paying it forward. I mean, this conversation, I would say, is one of the things that you can pay forward to others, right? And this also started with experimentation. I mean, not the experimentation you would see in the laboratory, but when I started this, actually, it's just like, will this work, or will this even add value or inspire others to, do more, and to be able to, like, work on their leadership as well, or to continue to learn. So again, it's always like, so one of my team members said, I always go head first. So I don't know how good or bad it is, but I mean, you'll never know if it works unless you try, right?
Exactly, exactly. It's very easy to tell yourself all the reasons why you can't. It's very difficult to tell yourself all the reasons why you can. But once you do that, you actually get to the art of the possible, and you then realize, hey, maybe I can achieve this. It always comes down to that mindset. Absolutely.
Yes, thank you so much. And so, is there any other message that you'd like to leave our audience with, at as we end this conversation?
I think if I can, really, then I'll leave with two things. Or three things actually, because the power of three is always good. Because we tend to remember three things better than we remember two things. I don't know why. I think the first is never stop learning. Just never stop learning. I don't care where you are, what you do, what your role is, what your position is. Just never stop learning.
Mhm.
The second aspect is transformation is hard. And once you acknowledge that, and you get the right people around you, it actually can be a positive experience. But acknowledging the difficulties is key. And then lastly, as a leader, just bring the best of who you are. Bring the best of who you are as a leader, because whatever negative feelings you bring into a role, into a meeting room, into a conversation, into an email, I guarantee you that will expand exponentially across your team, where people sort of go, "Oh, boss is in a bad mood," and don't get involved and don't interact. So always try to bring the best of who you are. That doesn't take away from being genuine. If you're having a hard day, it's okay to explain that, and you'll often find that if you explain it, maybe the day becomes a little less hard. But yeah, just bring the best of who you are.
Yes, thank you so much. And just bringing the best of who we are. actually means a lot, not only to ourselves, to our soul, but also to others. Just being ourselves is really our purpose, right? So thank you so much for that beautiful message. I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you for taking time to have this interview with me. And again, thank you everyone for those who are watching us both on live and the replay. Do join us in this journey to create like more opportunities, um, to make this world a better place to live in, right? And remember that even the richest investors in the world would say investing in yourself is the best investment that you can ever make in your life. So if your actions create legacy that inspires others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are an excellent leader. Thank you so much for being an excellent leader for us, Nathan, for especially for today. And yeah, looking forward to more collaborations with you. And to everyone else, thank you so much and stay safe. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye bye.